ERP is actually fetching the data from the cloud. So there's a whole lot of configuration that you actually need to do in ERP to make that happen. We used Business Integration Builder. So now that we had a better understanding of what we were in for, we had to make a firm decision. Do we continue with our implementation plan, but now with integration factored in, or do we put that on hold and start with a talent suite instead? So what helped us to make our decision was David stepping up and graciously volunteering to assist us with getting our integration configured. So our decision was made. We would stick to our plan with starting with Employee Central, but with integration factored in, and then move on to the talent modules. So after a lot of configuration, and I mean a lot of data cleansing, and a lot of testing and more testing, we could now prepare for go live. There was just the small matter of deciding on our replication schedule and getting replication set up.
So when it comes to replication, everything is triggered by the payroll system through a whole lot of scheduled batch jobs. So I won't bore you with the details, but there are a bunch of jobs to set up that run each time that you want to replicate, and a few more that run daily just to clean things up and keep things tidy. So if you want to replicate data every hour during working hours, it would mean that more than 50 jobs run each day. And of course, there's the small matter of all of the logs that are generated in the process. So it might seem complicated, but the beauty of replication is that it creates a lot of logs. So if something does go wrong, excuse me, then we can find out why and fix it. The trick is knowing where to look, how often to look, and also what kind of person should be looking at these different sets of logs.
So as it turns out, going live is actually just your starting point of your journey to the cloud. Once you're live, that's when the rubber hits the road. And let's be frank, no one wants to be left holding this particular baby when it comes to manually monitoring and troubleshooting replication. The importance of on-time, accurate data replication means that it needs constant focus. Issues must be detected and corrected quickly, and the reason for failure could be quite technical, or it could be a matter of master data issues that ERP is not liking. It's one thing to allocate this job to somebody. It's quite another for them to remember each and every time replication runs, to go and have a look at the logs, troubleshoot and get everything back in good order before the next replication happens or next payroll happens. So we turn to David again for guidance on this one.
So I knew how tedious manual monitoring was. So like a hot potato, I handed this baby over to our unsuspecting lead technical consultant, who's actually standing over there. His name is Shay. And within a few days, he got so over it that he actually developed an automated system to handle his job for him. And this was the start of our K5 replication monitoring tool. So over the past few years, we've enhanced and fine-tuned it. It automatically pulls logs from all of the different systems into one place, analyzes them, and reports on what really matters. It works out which problems have already been resolved and which still need resolution. It emails a daily health report, as well as ad hoc alert notifications whenever something goes wrong throughout the day. The point of the tool is really to take away the pain of monitoring, so no one has to log in regularly throughout the day to make sure that things are running smoothly. The tool keeps an eye on things, and it will let you know if anything goes wrong, whether it's related to data issues in SuccessFactors or more technical connectivity problems. And then we like to present things in a graphical way with charts where possible, and we like to give it a bit of a human touch to make everything less boring. The monitoring sends out 2 emails, and before I show you what these emails look like, let's take a bit of a bird's eye view. So this is an alert notification that is sent when any problems are found. The email has a header with a picture stating how serious the alert is. It then gives some traffic lights tiles to indicate what problems were found, followed by some graphs, and finally the details of the problems for troubleshooting purposes. The other email is a daily health report sent once a day. The email again has a header with a picture indicating the overall replication health status. If there are any high priority warnings, they're shown boldly up top. The next section shows some graphs to visually represent the volume of open problems. It then shows the traffic light tiles again, but this time as a view of all problems found the previous day. There's a nice graph that shows volume and trends of replication. And finally, the details are listed at the bottom of the email. So now let's look at these emails in a bit more detail. So this is an example of an ad hoc alert notification email. This is the kind of email that is sent as and when a problem occurs. So if nothing goes wrong, then no emails are sent out.
For us, this really is a case of no news is good news.
So here we give a high-level traffic light overview of new problems detected. Each alert type has a tile and is linked to a team or a person's name. Technical errors are things like broken network connectivity integration, user authentication issues, or SSL certificate problems and things like that. They're usually seen to by the SAP Basis team or the IT infrastructure team. Temporary errors are errors which occur when replication is prevented from or is preventing some sort of temporary condition that will resolve itself over time. So a typical example is when the payroll control record is locked. And that prevents master data changes in the system. Or if a user is locking an employee or an object in PA30, then replication can't make the required updates in your payroll system until that user unlocks the object. So the reason this tile is yellow is because it's more for information purposes, as it almost always resolves itself. The way that these work is that every time replication runs, it'll try to run these temporary errors again until they finally resolve themselves. Failure alerts indicate when replication has failed and will not fix itself. So it means further investigation will be needed. It's usually data problems, like when a change is made too far into the past, or some other validation that would have failed in PA30, but where SuccessFactors didn't have some sort of validation to stop the user from making the mistake in the first place. Sometimes there can be cases where in the replication logs it gives a warning message instead of an error message. This means replication does actually work, but the warning might indicate something that is business critical for you. So we can flag these items so that they can be tracked even though they weren't like hard stop errors. An example here is that you might have integration turned on between your standalone SAP Payroll system and the SAP Finance system. And the cost center validation checks fail because of maybe a network connectivity issue. And this would cause a warning while still replicating. And some companies prefer for this to be highlighted and resolved when it happens to avoid payroll postings into the incorrect cost center, or worse, to have payroll fall over because of an invalid cost center. We set the system up so that the emails are sent based on the types of alerts. For example, when there are technical errors, then we might include the SAP Basis team in the email. And if there's replication failures, then we might include the HR master data team or the payroll team. If there are any unresolved problems from previous reports, then we include those in the email as a constant reminder that there is work still to be done. If it's not fixed, it'll stay on these reports. There are certain things like org objects and employee org assignment data that get put into what we call staging tables when replicated. And this means that the changes haven't been committed to the actual database yet, but still need to be processed. Now, sometimes things can happen and they can get stuck there for various reasons. And so we include a graph just to give a visual representation if this does happen.
So we aim to attend to issues that need intervention before the next replication run if possible, otherwise within a 24-hour period, always staying alert to how these issues may impact our next payroll run. The various graphs really help us to quickly see how many issues we've still got, how serious they are, and who needs to assist with getting them resolved.
While our graphs look nice and everything, we obviously need to give some specific details so that you can see what needs to be fixed. So here we show more details about new problems found since the last report was sent.
This saves us a huge amount of time, as now we don't have to go hunting for the issues, and it speeds up our troubleshooting dramatically.
And finally, if there are older unresolved items, then we give those details too. Again, we keep these details on every email that we send out until the problems are resolved. So this avoids people forgetting about problems or thinking that they've somehow resolved themselves. Right, and that's the end of our ad hoc alert notification email example. So now let's have a look at what the daily health report looks like. This email is sent every morning. It tells you what the status of your replication system is currently and gives an overview of what happened the day before. So we've tried to keep it simple enough not to be overwhelmingly boring, while still including the most important information. You'll see that we do repeat some information from the ad hoc alert notifications, but it's configurable and you can choose which sections you want to include.
So while we appreciate not being spammed after every replication run, it is very helpful to get a daily health report to understand how we're doing. And we particularly love seeing the happy senior consultant greet us at 7 a.m. in the morning when we receive our daily health report to let us know that everything is on track. We get this report at 7 a.m. to buy us a little bit of time to do an analysis if it's needed. And then we begin our replication from 8 a.m., replicating roughly every hour and a half up until 6:30 p.m. daily.
If there are any SSL certificates that are nearing expiry, we'll highlight that right at the top of the email. In our experience, the SSL certificates are often forgotten and replication goes down unexpectedly when this does expire.
We can confirm this definitely is one of the most hidden aspects of your integration setup and can very easily catch you off guard. Before we had this covered in the replication monitor, we actually had an instance of certificates quietly expiring and causing some panic just before a major payroll run. Some of our basis people sitting here in the audience can verify this. So getting an early warning really helps us to ensure that we've got our certificate expiries in hand. We can then involve the correct stakeholders, take the necessary action before expiring certificates, pull the plug on our replication.
So it's possible under certain conditions that replication stops entirely without showing any errors in the logs. And so we do a pulse check on the replication and show an alert if it seems like the replication has stopped working entirely. So as in the ad hoc alert notification email, we show a graph of the number of unresolved problems and how old they are, as well as the unprocessed staging records graph if it's relevant at the time. For information purposes, again, we give you the traffic light view of what happened the previous day. So basically, it's an aggregate view of all of the previous day's alerts summed up. There's nothing you have to do about these. It's more just to give you a visual view of how things went yesterday at a glance. This is one of my personal favorites. We show you how many objects have been replicated over time. So it's a nice way to pick up trends about how actively HR data is being maintained and how many errors you're getting along the way.
I have to say, we love all of the graphs, but we particularly love this one when it's mainly green.
If there are any SSL certificates that will expire soon, we just give the details at the bottom of this email. We again list the details of any unresolved replication failures to make sure that they never get forgotten. Once the data has been corrected in SuccessFactors, then the items will automatically be marked as resolved and removed from the list. And finally, we give a view of any items that were corrected the previous day, again, just for information purposes and to see if your teams are actually doing any work.
So the beauty of the health report for us is that if you did somehow miss an issue as it popped up the day before, you will keep getting a reminder until you get those issues resolved. And it's also great to see what has already been resolved as we're going along. So to recap, when it comes to replication monitoring, you may not have realized it, but you do have options. You could choose to go the manual route, or you could go the automated option. For us, this was a very easy choice. Thanks to the automated monitoring option, most of the issues can be addressed without having to involve our very technical IT members, and no one in the team has to remember to keep an eye on this particular baby. So in terms of some of the lessons that we've learned along the way, for a fully integrated talent solution, you actually need Employee Central. Employee Central must be aligned to what your payroll system needs. There's more to setting up integration than meets the eye, but you don't necessarily need real-time replication. There's also more to keeping integration alive than you may have thought, but the hard work in getting it set up upfront is really worth it. You really need to stay on top of the biannual release changes, and don't forget about your business integration builder patching as well. Test, and test some more. What we've come to appreciate is change is actually good. We now have access to the latest technology and functionality aligned with changing trends in the talent management space. However, change management is essential, and it's an ongoing activity, not a once-off event. We have a very small but dedicated team who work tirelessly to get us to a go-live state and continue to do so to ensure that our system is alive and thriving. And I can't tell you more how much value an implementation and support partner who truly understands your needs as an organization adds huge value to you.
And to finish off from my side, I'd like to suggest some tips to reduce the number of replication errors that you might get. The first one is low-hanging fruit. There's functionality in Employee Central where you can set up your pay dates and have the system give warnings or errors whenever users try to make changes too far into the past. For example, someone tries to make a change of banking details backdated to before the previous payroll run. Without this feature, you can expect a lot of replication errors. Next is business rule validations. It's way better to catch problems while a user is inputting the data rather than allowing them to make a mistake only for replication to fail a bit later. Business rules can be complicated though, and they have their limitations. They're certainly not as powerful as user exits in SAP Payroll used to be. Because of the limitations, it is a fine balance between deciding how many business rules to implement for validations, but focus on the high-touch areas, and you'll save a lot of trouble when it comes to replication. Process training for your users is really important. You need to help them understand that what couldn't be done in PA30 shouldn't be done in SuccessFactors. Employee Central was never intended to be a like-for-like replacement of your SAP HR system. There are many things that Employee Central will let you do that SAP HR would not. So clearly written standard operating procedures go a long way to help users capture things the right way. An example of this might be instructions on how to capture an extension for a fixed-term contract or something like that. Another important thing is to let relevant users know what times of the day replication is running so that they can know when to expect the data to arrive in the payroll system. In Employee Central, you can capture multiple events on the same day. For example, you can hire someone and then do a data change on the same day. In SAP Payroll, you have to turn on something called additional actions for this to work. So if you haven't already turned this on, then you'll need to do this to prevent a lot of replication problems. I always advise clients to only replicate what they have to, nothing more. If you're replicating purely for payroll purposes, then don't replicate emergency contacts or dependent information or any other information that's not relevant or required to run your payroll. A minimalist approach reduces the number of logs and the potential problems and is also more compliant with POPI and GDPR. And finally, we really just need to stay on top of any problems that pop up. Don't bury your head in the sand and let your monitoring slip. Lack of attention on replication errors can very quickly lead to dual capture in SuccessFactors and your SAP Payroll system, simply to get your payroll through, and that is not a good situation to be in, and it's a nightmare to try and resolve afterwards.
Okay, so where are we in our journey now? Well, to date, Employee Central data has been part of more than 1,000 payroll runs and counting. And I'm very pleased to say that we have not had any instances of replication causing issues with any of these payroll runs. We now have a platform to offer employee and manager self-service to all of our employees. Although it took longer than planned, our talent modules have been implemented and rolled out to the relevant employees throughout our organization. We have a very well-established biannual release and patch management strategy that enables us to test any changes with each new release and effectively adopt the latest functionality. We pretty much adopt everything. As a result, we're now in a good space where we are continually focusing on optimizing our talent solutions to further drive value add to the Toyota team. So the big question is, are we glad we embarked on this journey? Absolutely.
So if you're keen to enter a draw to win a 1-year subscription to the K5 Replication Monitor, please feel free to come to the K5 business stand. Quick little punt over there. And you can also get an interactive demo.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. We hope you enjoyed our session and you had some valuable takeaways. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask us now or come and find us throughout the conference.
Cool.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Any questions?
Yes, we have.
Yes, the back there.
What do you use for time and attendance and overtime, etc., into the payroll?
We have not taken that into the cloud as yet. We use third-party solutions for that at the moment.
Directly into
In ERP, yes.
There was another.
and your journey for payroll into SuccessFactors?
That's a very good question. We're busy studying our options at the moment. Yeah. It's imminent that we have to make a choice. Yeah.
I'm interested in the very first part you talked about integration, setup, and discovery, that the data cleanup and that stuff.
Yes.
Because I'm considering it to go into that, so we're just interested in knowing how much work needs to be done, if there is, and what are we getting ourselves into.
Yes, very good question. So I think for us, we underestimated the data cleanup requirements. So as David said, you want to attempt to take a minimalistic approach. You want to try and not firstly take things into the cloud that you don't need to and then have to replicate them back to ERP. But we have a policy of company number for life. So that means that we did have to take on a lot of historical data. Lucky we had David on side. He had some very creative solutions for us to help us get that historical data on. If anyone has ever worked at Toyota, you exist in SuccessFactors in our organization. So you do end up finding out that maybe some of the positions have been delimited. We created some sort of placeholder dummy positions in those cases. We had to set new number ranges in certain instances as well.
Yeah, it's a really big topic, and
It's
that
huge.
could take a whole
It's huge.
workshop
Yeah.
to go into
Yeah.
that data cleanups
Yeah.
exercise. But just simple examples is like emergency contacts. When you look at how that's maintained in SAP, you would be surprised when you extract that data how inconsistently it's maintained, where someone will
Yes.
use one field to put the person's name, and another person puts an address in the same field. Now, how do you migrate that to a system? You can't. You have to clean that up before you can migrate it. And that's just one example of many that you'll find when you start really looking into your data.
Yeah.
The other part, the health checks, those graphs that you were showing, how often do you do that? Is it at implementation or as you go along with the success factors, that has to always be there?
It has to always be there.
Yeah.
So basically, every single time you run replication, Dave, I don't know if you can go back to the slide with the logs, because that really paints a big picture. If you don't have a tool, somebody, and my basis people in the audience can verify this one. We asked them for SLG1, and they said, what? Why do HR people need SLG1? So basically, if you are not using a tool, you're having to go into very technical logs, but looking for HR problems. So it's quite a strange one, I think, for a lot of customers. So if you are not using an automated tool, you literally need to to go into various systems when there's a failure, starting typically with SLG1, having a look if you can decipher the error messages, what the issue might be, and then get it corrected. For us, the big issues, and we took a fairly minimalistic approach. We're only replicating 7 times a day. Some customers, we believe, are keen to replicate a lot more often than that. And that's why I say you don't necessarily need real time. Consider your choices carefully. Because every time you run that replication, you need to make sure that everything has worked and is in good order.
Cool. There was a hand over there. Oh, mic for streaming, sorry. You want to just hand the mic to the gentleman there? Thanks.
Thank you. Mine is on recruitment. Number one, if you use recruitment, SAP recruitment on end-to-end, then secondly, to what extent would you say you have minimized human interaction, especially on the output side of recruitment? Thank you.
Okay, so recruitment, I think we need to be realistic. You're always going to have the human side.
That's working.
Yeah, so we never implemented SAP on-prem recruitment. So we implemented the SuccessFactors module suite from scratch. Otherwise, you find there's a lot of other replications required to and fro between Employee Central, if you're using Employee Central, and SAP on-prem recruiting. So we went with a full suite in SuccessFactors. There's some really cool functionality in the SuccessFactors recruiting modules, but that's also a huge topic that I think we need to cover in a different session.
Yes.
So I just want to know, with regards to the log and audit, for audit tracking, how long do you keep them?
The logs. So the logs are actually residing in all the different SAP systems, and they are kept there in accordance with your policies.
With our policies.
Within your
And if
internal
there's another
policies.
external system, so for example, at APSA we've got Workday, and a lot of companies are going into Workday. Workday is the source, and we've got SAP, and then of course we're thinking about going on to SuccessFactors. Is that going to be like a train smash?
No.
Or
That shouldn't be an
can I even think about it?
So you may have noted one of the decision points for us was that we had a spaghetti system. We had manual, we had third party, and we had homegrown. It becomes a nightmare to manage. So for us, the best option was to go full on SuccessFactors for the talent modules. Everything then hooks into each other. The key thing is to have Employee Central as your foundation so you don't end up having rework, because everything can then hook into how you have configured Employee Central. If you've done that, you know that your data is going to feed into your payroll system happily.
Thank you. I just want to find out compensation. You mentioned it right in front. I haven't heard anything mentioned about it as you went along. Have you implemented it, and how's it going?
Very good question. So in terms of our initial plan, we ended up not implementing compensation because, again, one of the discoveries were that you need quite a bit of your payroll information in order to feed that. And we have not yet made that decision in terms of where payroll will reside. So that one's also sort of in a holding pattern until we decide on our way forward.
Great presentation, well done. Just a comment and a question that go hand in hand. So you've mentioned how hard integration is. My opinion is it is hard, but if you go with any other product and start bringing in third parties, it's even harder. So if you think SuccessFactors and SAP is difficult, try something different. And I'd like to know, David, if you agree and if you have any views on that.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely do agree. You know, it's one of those scenarios where you think the grass is always greener on the other side. And so any system that you look at, and this is, I hope I'm not going to offend any sales executives in the room, if there are any. But when it comes to any vendor that's going to try and sell you something, they're going to give you the high-level view. And the complexity of the integration does not come through in those discussions usually. And that it's not SAP specific, it's any system. And that's the challenge that Toyota's obviously discovered in this process. And we've had colleagues that have worked on both SuccessFactors and other competing vendors, and it's always the same challenges across vendors. So I would definitely not say that this is more complicated by any means than any other system that we've seen.
Yeah, and at least you do have the standard integration. So it is SAP to SAP. As difficult as it may be, at least they know each other.
Cool. Oh, we've got another one there.
Yeah, so as my colleague mentioned about compensation, I think I also saw performance and the goals. I don't know how was the journey rather.
Okay, so again, I would strongly suggest you go and pay a visit to David. Thanks to a very unique methodology that K5 used for us for phase 2, our timelines were actually way shorter than we thought they were going to be. And our performance and goals and succession and development modules are working like a dream. They've been live now. We're in our 3rd cycle. And we use everything. So we're using, in terms of performance and goals, from goal setting all the way through to calibration, to feeding the data into payroll for any payments that are linked to that. Those two systems work on the same kind of template base, so I would also recommend doing them together.
Cool. Great, thanks everyone. I think we've run out of time. Really appreciate your time. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.